Yo, what is up guys? It's Pedro here, and in today's video I will be giving you guys my 2022 outlook for the Washington Commanders running back room. I'll talk about how they stack up against other running back rooms in the NFL. I'll talk about who will make the final 53-man roster, and will there be any surprise cuts for the Washington Commanders running back. So if you guys are new, make sure to subscribe for Washington and NFL content. Hit that like button and turn on those notifications and hit that thanks button if you guys can. Now, let's get right into the video. One of the main things that the Washington Commanders did last season during their 4-game win streak was run the football, and run the football a lot, and that I think really contributed to them winning those games. I mean, they were controlling the time of possession, they were winning the possession battle, which really helped them out. And their running backs during those 4 games were playing pretty well. I mean, Gibson was running the ball pretty well. I mean, it wasn't like insane yards per carry, but he was, getting them the first downs they needed. They were able to get 4 yards per carry, and they just kept on doing that, and they kept getting first downs. Patterson had a couple nice games in that stretch. McKissic, of course, had some good stretches. And now, adding Brian Robinson, I think this will help them even more, especially in the short yardage situations. We're going to get into that in a little bit. So let's look at the Washington Commanders depth chart at the running back position. I like the layout of the ESPN depth chart better, but this shows all the running backs. So if you look at the running backs, Gibson, J.D. McKissic, Brian Robinson, Jaret Patterson, Jonathan Williams, those guys were all on the roster last year except for Brian Robinson, who got drafted. And then Reggie Bonifant, who I believe is an undrafted free agent. So you got 6 guys right there. 3, maybe 4 of them will make the roster. I think it's pretty clear which 3 to 4 guys will make the roster. We kind of already know Gibson, McKissic, and Robinson are 100% locks. And then Patterson is that next guy for sure, pretty much. And he probably will make. We'll get into it. We'll get into it. There's definitely a chance he doesn't make it. It just depends on how many running backs they want to carry. They also have Alex Arma, fullback, but not a running back, but he was on the roster for parts of the season last year. So we're gonna go one by one, talk about those players' expectations and if they'll make the roster. So let's start off with Antonio Gibson. So Antonio Gibson, 3rd-round pick from 2020. So this is going to be his 3rd season. And, obviously we know the whole story. Switching from receiver to running back. Had a great rookie year. Like, really good rookie year. Averaged 4.7 yards per carry, 11 touchdowns. Missed a couple games. So those last few games he was kind of, playing hurt and still producing. Had 0 fumbles, in terms of running the football. I think he had like 1 or 2 receiving fumbles when he was, catching footballs. But he had 2 fumbles lost in 2020 and 6 fumbles in 2021 with 4 fumbles lost. So definitely increases, fumbles, and that's not a good thing. But he had over 1,000 yards rushing, had 7 touchdowns, averaged 4 yards per carry, and had, those 6 total fumbles. So really, had a solid season. The fumbles, though, really hurt us. And they were like fumbles at bad times and in bad spots. Like, he had that fumble in that Chargers game where not only were we up, but he also fumbled it inside our own like 5 to 10 yard line. So the Chargers went back and got a touchdown right away. That was very unfortunate. He had another fumble, I believe, at a bad time as well. I mean, it's never a good time to fumble, but like if you're at the 50 or at the 40, it's not terrible. But when you're at your own 10 or you're in the red zone, that is not a good spot to fumble. So Gibson, and the other thing with Gibson, he was hurt all year. Like, he only missed 1 game, and that was because of the virus. But besides that, he had a hip injury for a lot of the season. He had a shin injury, a shoulder injury, a toe injury. He was banged up all season, and I really think that contributed to him not being as efficient as he was in year 1. His yards per carry went down, and I'm not a huge yards per carry, stat fan. I think it's somewhat of a misleading stat, but you could see sometimes where he wasn't getting as many yards as he probably should have, and I think part of that is because of his injury, not as explosive as he was in his rookie year. And I mean, he was just injured all year, and you saw in that last game when he had that 1 week off because of the virus, and it really helped him out in that last game against the Giants. Really balled out. So I have high expectations for Gibson this year. One thing from the off season, he reduced his body his body fat percentage from 18 to 12%. So definitely cut some weight a little bit and cut that fat down. So I mean, that's great to see. We'll see how it affects his play. And yeah, I'm expecting big things for Gibson this year. I don't think, maybe his carries will go down a little bit. Like, let's say he goes down from 258 to maybe 240. I don't think it'll go down a ton. It'll go down a little bit because, let's say, even if Patterson makes the team, I don't think his carries will be as much as he did last year just because we have Robinson. So some of those carries will go to Robinson, and some of Gibson's carries will also go to Robinson. We'll see. But I think Gibson should 100%, if he's healthy this year, get over 1,000 yards, and maybe he can up that 4 yards per carry to like 4.5. Just be a little bit more efficient, and maybe get some more explosive plays, because he only had, his biggest play was 27 yards in as a runner, but he did have a big catch, 73 yards. He was a little bit better as a pass catcher, 94 yards, 3 touchdowns. Not as big of a jump though as I wanted to see. And, a lot of that was from that one catch. So hopefully they can involve him a little bit more in the passing game. And hopefully, he had a few drops this year. Let's hope he can correct that. And I hope they can, involve him a little bit more as a receiver in terms of like lining him up on the line of scrimmage sometimes, because Brian Robinson will be able to take some of those carries away. But I'm excited to see what Gibson can do in year 3. This is a big year for him, because if he can, ball out like be a little bit better than he was last year, I really think he can cement himself as one of the better running backs in the NFC and maybe even in the NFL. Next guy, J.D. McKissic. Don't have to talk about him too much. We know what type of guy J.D. McKissic is. Really aren't that many questions with him. I think J.P. Finley reported that he looked really good in OTAs. He looks like pretty much 100%. That injury should not affect him. He's one of the most important parts of this offense. Last year only had 212 rushing yards, but again, only played in 10.5 games, had 2 rushing touchdowns, averaged 4.4 yards per carry. So some pretty efficient. And then you look at, he was better as a runner this year than he was last year. Just had way less, rushing attempts because of the injury and because Gibson, was getting more carries this year. And then receiving wise, still as good as he ever was. I mean, 400 receiving yards in 10.5 games, 2 touchdowns. He had so many big plays for us. I mean, you look at that, 3 plays of over 20 yards as a receiver, 1 play of over 40 yards, like that catch in the Giants game was insane. He was amazing for us, that Falcons game as well. And I mean, you look at this 2020, 600 yards. Like, I think it'll be somewhere in between this if he does play the 16 games, just because I don't think they'll, Wentz is going to throw it to him as much as, Heineke, Alex Smith was in 2020. I still think he's going to be very efficient. He's a great, he's great at picking up blitzes as well. I love J.D. McKissic, one of my favorite players on this team. Switches number as well, if you didn't know, from 41 to 23, and Jonathan Williams is now 41. But I'm very excited to see what, McKissic can do this year coming off that injury. I don't think it'll have a huge effect on him. I think he's going to continue to ball out. Next guy, Brian Robinson from Alabama. This guy, drafted him at the end of the 3rd round. I think pick 98. He's about 6'1", 228 pounds. Played at Alabama, 23 years old, and he's going to be that bruiser back for us. Like, he's a guy that we're going to need on those short yardage situations. Let's look at his stats real quick. This past season really balled out for Alabama. Had 271 carries, 1,343 yards, average 5 yards per carry, had 14 touchdowns, and then also had 35 catches for 296 yards and 2 touchdowns. So had 16 total touchdowns, 1,639 total yards. And then besides that, in his first few years, didn't do a ton, which is good. Like, he didn't have a ton of carries, so he's not going to have so many carries where, he might get run to the ground in the NFL, but he has enough experience. Played 5 years at Alabama, played behind some really good running backs, Najee Harris, I believe Josh Jacobs, some other guys as well. So he's going to be ready. He might not be a star, but I think Brian Robinson will be for sure a very solid player. And he's a guy that right away, he's going to be able to he's going to at least be what Peyton Barber was in 2020, at least a couple carries a game, just solely based on 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, 4th and 1, 2nd and 2, those short yardage situations. That's already going to be a few carries a game, sometimes in the red zone as well. I also think even if Gibson isn't struggling with his fumbles, but definitely if he is, like if you're inside the 10, I'd probably rather have Brian Robinson give me a carry to just get a few yards or just to not fumble instead of Gibson. And definitely if I'm at my own one, I probably want Brian Robinson to do it as well. So probably between my my own goal line to the 15 to 20, I probably want Brian Robinson to take those carries. And same thing likely in the red zone as well, until Gibson proves that his fumbling problem is behind him, which I think he definitely can. I think those injuries had an issue had an effect on him for sure, and hopefully those injuries are behind him, and hopefully he's able to stay healthy. But that's not a guaranteed, and I also think Brian Robinson, besides those carries that he's already gonna get, take maybe 3-4 carries away from Gibson a game, and it can be wherever. It can be 1st and 10, 2nd and 6, whatever, just so that Gibson doesn't have 24, 25 carries a game, because you don't need him to do that, because you have someone like Brian Robinson, and then that way Gibson's fresher at the end of the season. He's not dealing with a ton of injuries, and I think 4 or 5 carries can, a game can really make a difference at the end of the season, and will help Gibson stay healthier and more efficient. I think it's a 3rd round pick. You made a significant investment in Brian Robinson. He should be getting 7 to 11 carries a game this season, because again, you invested a 3rd round pick on him. He can't just be a short yardage back. He's got to do more than that, and I think he can. He's 4.5 speed, so he's got enough speed. He can run over people. He's got better agility than you would think. He's not a home run guy, but I think he will be a solid contributor for us. Will definitely make the team 100% guaranteed, and I think probably get around 10 carries a game once probably average out around the season. Maybe initially it'll be 6, 7, 8, and then by the end of the season maybe it'll be more. We will see. Very excited to see what he can do this year. Seems like he's a very high floor guy, maybe a little bit lower ceiling though than some other players. Next guy on this list is Jaret Patterson. The first 3 guys I talked about, those guys will 100% make the roster. But Jaret Patterson could possibly be a surprise cut. I mean, some people already think he's going to be a cut, so maybe it's not too much of a surprise cut, but I think he'll probably make it. But there's not a guaranteed, because if they want to keep 3 running backs, then Jaret Patterson isn't going to make the team. But I can't remember how many running backs they kept last year. Gibson, Patterson, McKissic. They might have kept 4. I'm not sure, but I think it was 3. But I think they've kept 4 in the past, so they definitely could. And if they do, Patterson will make it. If they don't, obviously those 3 guys before him are going to make it. So it's going to be interesting to see if Patterson kind of looks like meh in training camp and in the preseason, then I think they'll move on from him. But if he takes a step up from last year, then I think they're going to be like, okay, if we release him, he's not going to make it back to our practice squad. He is going to get picked up by another team. If that's the case, I think they'll keep him on the 53-man roster and just have him inactive on game days, because you can't risk losing someone like Jaret Patterson, because I think he can be a solid NFL running back. And I mean, he was at times last year. You look at his stats, 68 carries, 268 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So, and 1 fumble. I don't think he lost one though. And then receiving wise had 73 yards. But I just don't. So you look at those 68 carries. I think probably most of those carries will be gone this year. Unless we have injuries. If we have injuries, of course, that changes everything. Because if Gibson goes down, then you're going to have, Brian Robinson, J.D. McKissic, and Patterson. And Patterson's going to be that number 2 runner. So, he'll get significant carries. But I don't know. I think Patterson, if I had to guess, I think he'll probably make it. But it's tough. I don't think it's a guarantee. The thing is, though, I think they kept 8 receivers last year. They're not going to keep 8 receivers this year. They'll keep 7 at most, maybe only 6. But I think Alex Erickson will make it just as a returner. So they probably will keep 6, maybe 7. So that's already 1 roster spot that's saved. And then it just depends on the other positions, how everything's going to work out. They might only keep 3 tackles this year. So if that's the case, maybe they'll have space for an extra running back in Jaret Patterson, and I think they would like to keep him because he seems like a good guy. He's a local guy, and he's got good chemistry with Chase Young and some of the other guys on the team. So, Jaret Patterson, and he's showed good potential as well. So hopefully he makes the team. If I had to guess, he will. but not a 100% guarantee. On the other running backs, let's go back to the depth chart. Jonathan Williams, don't think he'll make it, but he did play well last year. I think in the Eagles game and a couple others. He will, if he makes it to the practice squad, he'll 100% make it back to us. Maybe another team will pick him up. I don't think so, though. And Reggie Bonifon, I really don't know much about him. I doubt he'll make the team, but we will see. So thank you guys for watching this video. Let me know what you guys think about the Washington Commanders running back room, expectations for them. I think this is a very solid unit. Not top 5, but I think it's an above average unit for sure. Maybe top 10. I think that's kind of where I would put it, top 12, because they've got a solid running back in Gibson, one of the best pass catchers in McKissic, and then a very, solid running back in Robinson and Patterson. So yeah, thanks for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed, and peace.